Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Bother the Father. Again, this is an open forum, open discussion. If there's any questions, we have two fathers here tonight. So you can bother two fathers if you so desire. I'm sure if I can't answer, I'm sure Father Vincent will be able to answer any questions you may have with these things. So open it up to anybody who would like to start.
What about not voting?
Yeah.
Now, I have to say, as Americans, this goes against every bit of grain that we've been taught.
Right.
And we kind of, as personally, I feel disrespectful to people that I don't even know when I don't vote.
Sure.
Because a lot of, the patriotism and the things that have been our foundations and our ideas. But sometimes I hear, not to call on them, but like maybe something. No matter what I do, I'm not going to change anything. It's like, get out of my way, Satan. This world is dying as we know it. They're worst of two evils, didn't you say? So
yeah, I mean,
how do we face that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, and I think that's something that every American, especially American Catholics, deal with every 4 years, if not every 2 years, right? I mean, when we talk about our congressmen or president or senators or even governor, right, local election. I think it's a little more complicated these days when it comes to these choices because, yeah, it does kind of come down to a lesser of two evils, right? And as we talked about at the beginning of the month with, how do Catholics work in the process of democracy, and how do we be good citizens, which we're called to do, right? And I think primarily we look at that as our right to vote. That's where our authority comes from, our power, right? And so our authority should be used always for good. The problem, I think, as this is what you're getting at, John, is what happens if there is no good?
Like, yeah, these last 4 years, there's no good guns in my
right. Right. So, I mean, in that respect, I mean, I have to say, like, just personally, every election I've participated in has been that what's lesser of two evils, and it's unfortunate that we're at that point. I think maybe it's always really been like that.
I have to interject here
Sure.
and say,
Yeah.
it's always been like
Yeah.
that. People have always been human. Nothing is ever going to be perfect.
Right.
And you have to take the less of two evils.
Right.
And not to vote is also a vote.
That is true. So not voting is also kind of you're saying something by doing that too. In other words, you're not using that gift that we would say is given to you by God for good or bad. But I think can be a moral decision being made there. So, for instance, let's say you had a choice between a mass murderer and a thief, right? A mass theft person, right? Well, those are both not good, right? And by voting for one of them, you're basically going to be contributing in some way to some evil, right? So I think to that point, there can be a moral argument made to say not vote. Now, I think, though, the more rational thing, the more reasonable thing to do is if you can't make a decision between the two, one of the great things we have in our democracy, in our republic, is write-in candidates, right? We can do that. We can write someone in if we so desire, and that would be a vote. Now, some may say, practically speaking, that's throwing your vote away. Well, that might be true. But if you're going by your conscience, and that's what your conscience drives you to do, that is not immoral to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have to always take that into context as far as like, well, yeah, so non-voting is a moral option, but that would only probably be the best option if there's no other scenario that would really work, right? So to that point, I mean, there were a few elections ago, I could say personally, I felt that I couldn't vote for either one of them, either candidate. And at the time, it was actually just kind of by chance. Like a week lead up to the election, I found out about this candidate who upheld all the Catholic teachings and was a Catholic candidate, so to speak. I think he had a particular party that was run on Catholic values. He himself was Catholic. And I wrote him in, right? Because, hey, this person aligns with my values completely. To me, that's the best moral option that allows me to sleep at night, right?
And he was or that person was an actual candidate too. It wasn't like you were. So it wasn't like you were voting in.
So right, they weren't on the ballot, right? But I mean, I did write that name in, and so I think that's a great advantage we have as Americans, that we do have that right, that option. And I think we is unfortunate that we don't necessarily value that enough to maybe look at those things. And maybe some may argue, well, you threw your vote away. Maybe I did, but I could sleep at night,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we have to. That's when we talk about these things, that there's moral issues and there's discernment, right? So, in general, the moral option would be, well, if I'm forced to choose and actually have some impact, and that's another thing. Prudence has come into play here too, which is why even talking about, like, okay, if you have a pro-abortion candidate, for instance, right? Well, a Catholic in good conscience can vote for that candidate, provided that's the lesser of two evils in their moral judgment. Meaning, well, yeah, this person does support abortion, but they are putting policies in place to help people to find a just wage, to provide for the poor, to be conscientious of the worker.
Mm-hmm.
That can actually help with the
People,
abortion
right,
issue,
yeah.
right? So you can say, well, these other issues though lead into that life dignity issue that can support it, even though their stance on the abortion would be negative, right? That, like we were talking about at the beginning of the month, that's why voting on one issue can be problematic. But as we also discussed somebody is actually pro-abortion to an extreme, right? And unfortunately, I think that's what we're dealing with right now. That would disqualify them from me voting for them, just that one issue alone, right? But again, a lot of these are circumstantial. It kind of comes down to, well, who are the candidates? What are the positions? What are the policies? And how do we weigh those in our conscience about what's greater and what's less?
And are they telling the truth?
Well, that's another factor too, because we
have to trust.
right. I mean, we would.
Well, you have to
that.
trust.
Yeah.
But you also have to do your research.
Of course.
And if you do your research and you go back through their record, you'll know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, they have a
track record,
and you can see where some of them are just plain out.
Right, and to that point, I mean, that's one thing we have in this election, that we do have records of both our candidates in the positions they held, right, which can help us make those determinations. I think sometimes, to your point though, John, sometimes you take rhetoric, right?
Yeah.
And I think as we look with a lot of politicians, well, a lot of politicians will say a lot of things on both sides of the parties to get your vote, right? And so, again, but I think the thing is we still try to do the best we can. And I think, to Connie's point, that's why looking at the practical record of what they've done can inform us better than what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not necessarily moral judgment. That's actually prudential judgment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, right. I think we all take all that considered.
It's math. You do the math.
Right.
Look at the proof.
All that considered helps us to form a better understanding of who we're voting for. And then hopefully our conscience will tell us what the best option would be.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's, I mean, that's the thing. It's not easy. It's not easy for any of us, you know, whoever we vote for. Like we talked about last time, you are kind of cooperating in some way. If you're looking at the major parties and you say, well, I'm going to vote for this person because I know they're going to win, and they more align with my value. Sure, but they also promote values that don't. Right? And so regardless of who you vote for, you are going to cooperate in some way, what we call material cooperation with evil, right? If not formal cooperation. That's again, I think the difference between like something like Amendment 3 and voting for a candidate. And I mean, I got a little bit of hate mail on this in some ways, but by voting on Amendment 3, it's pretty evident that that's grave matter of the soul, right?
Well, yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying, that Catholics in conscience, we do have an obligation to promote the teaching of the church, which means if you just look at the laws, this law that's being presented, it doesn't support any of the Catholic teachings. Not to mention, it's just a badly written law.
You know, that came up at work the other day, and some of the folks at work didn't hear that.
Where do you work?
Miller. I work for Miller Furniture.
Okay.
Yeah, and always good, healthy conversation.
Yeah.
But you know, I have heard that abortion with this bill has been allowed up into 9 months.
Yes.
And that, you know what? Some of the folks where I was, were on the opposite side of this, were for reproductive rights, but they didn't. They said, no, that's not true.
Okay, so that point. So if you look at the actual what the bill presents, right? It doesn't say allows abortion for 9 months. That's true. It does not. But what it does allow abortion after viability for reasons of mental, emotional, physical health of the mother. That's where the 9 months comes into play. Because if, let's say I'm a pregnant woman, my significant other leaves me. I am now in my 6th month of pregnancy, which would be past viability, but I have this mental anguish because I'm now going to be alone to take care of this child. Oh no, doctor, I need to get rid of this child. That, according to the law, would be grounds to have the abortion. So right, that's true. It doesn't say it allows up to 9 months. That is true. But what it does say is it allows for abortion for any reason of the mental health, physical health, and we would agree with the physical health, the emotional health or psychological health of the mother after viability, which, as we know, can be very varied, right? And I think the tragic thing about this is that, many people don't understand the great emotional, psychological trauma that women experience to go through the abortion. That you're actually compounding those things by allowing a woman to do that. Now, I think a good psychologist, a good doctor that's worth their salt may understand that. But I think the evidence is that many of our medical community do not recognize that. Right?
One thing go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, if the public was educated on abortions,
right,
and they had to face that abortion, it would be outlawed.
Well, and that's part of the argument against this, because the wording they use is really particular.
And they use that in every single amendment.
The wording they use in this particular amendment is used particularly because it does mask those scenarios. It does leave it rather vague and open to interpretation because, well, that's the point, right? We don't want to get specific with laws, and in general, you don't want to get specific with laws. That's kind of true. There's kind of a maxim that states that you always legislate for generalities, not for particulars.
And so that leads me to what I'm about to say. So there's 6 people in a room, all in their 50s, all love children, family, and life, but completely divided on this. Now, if you took it up by situation and said, here's a lady whose life is in danger, I think we're all going to say the same thing.
Right.
And I think if you said, now here are hundreds of young ladies who are probably going to be talked into a bad decision because they don't have good support and it's going to be messed up, I think we're all going to make the same decision. However, when we go into the voting booth, half of us are going to be one side and half of us are going to be on the other. It's like that's so
well because here's the driving point behind that, right? And in some ways, it is a false compassion. It's saying I don't want to push my views on anybody else. Who am I to say I'm going to limit somebody from what they can or cannot do? Well, the problem with that, though, is that we do that all the time with the laws.
Yeah,
that's what laws do. I mean, to have a law that says you cannot murder somebody. That's putting a limit on somebody, right?
I like that one.
Yeah.
I'm for that one.
Right, exactly. I think we all are. But that's still putting a limit on this, right? I mean,
it makes
so
me so upset because they never take into consideration the child.
Well, exactly. Because again, another premise of this is that, well, it's not a child. Right?
I know. And
it's not a child. It's a clump of cells that has not been fully developed yet. But I mean, and this is why I love Kristen Hawkins. She has Students for Life. She does a great work on YouTube and goes to college campuses and has these kind of debates. We're all a clump of cells. That's the whole point. These clump of cells can't be anything but a human. And I think it's also tragic that oftentimes, especially Catholic politicians, they'll take particular saints and theologians and use that argument against the understanding of when it becomes human, because there have been certain saints, particularly St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, who were stating things like, the question came about, when does the soul enter the body?
Enter the body.
Well, philosophically, you understand that a soul is present when there is movement, growth, right? So Augustine would say, yeah, it's probably like, 8 days for the time of conception, because again, they didn't have the privilege of having ultrasounds and things that we have now. They can see, oh look, the egg's splitting. Oh, that's growing. That's a soul. Thomas Aquinas, same thing. I think he kind of argues like, well, maybe it's like a few days. But again, they didn't. What they're looking at is, well, the mother's belly's getting bigger, so that shows growth. That's a soul. When does that start happening for most women? Well, maybe the first trimester.
Right.
So does that mean there's like 3 months where it's not a soul? Well, no. Because if Thomas and if Augustine had those benefits, they would say, well, there's a soul.
It's a little person.
You're done.
You know, if
But to that point, they still would not argue. They would still argue, though, that even if there weren't a soul present, it would be morally wrong to stop that progression. Because the potentiality of that being, whatever it is going to become human.
Nothing else.
Nothing else.
it is a human.
Well, no.
But
the
they're
point,
saying,
the point
if
they're
you
making.
say it's not yet.
I
or
know.
not now,
Yeah.
My
And
point,
and the church teaches that now too. But what they're saying, without the benefit of having this understanding, we would say even if there weren't a soul, you shouldn't still do anything with
but
it.
there's a soul the minute of consciousness.
No, I know, Connie, but
I know,
yeah,
I
yeah,
just get
we're all
so
saying
upset.
that. That's the
I
thing.
know,
Everyone would
I
say
know.
that.
I'm sorry.
But that's what makes it so frustrating with our Catholic politicians who use those arguments, because they're not reading everything in context. And the point is, those theologians weren't trying to answer that question. When Augustine was talking about this stuff, what he was talking about was the goods of marriage. He wasn't trying really to answer the question when the soul is the body, enters the body. He was trying to say marriage is good
Nor what
because
the
it does these things.
ramifications could mean by
Exactly
one
right.
conversation. And
Exactly
nothing
right.
else.
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, these are incredibly frustrating because they're not. First off, they're taken out of context, and thirdly, we have the benefit of this great gift we're given called science, that is shown this is the case and backs up the philosophy and the theology behind these things. Actually, I've been contemplating this, and I think I might do it. I've been kind of in open dialogue with somebody through email about this particular issue, and I think I'm going to read the letter anonymously at my homily next weekend, because I think it does shed the light on a lot of things. Because one of the arguments the person was making is like, it's kind of a matter of opinion. And because they even use like, well, Jewish people would say that it's not a baby until it's born. Now, my response to that would be, what Jewish people and which ones? Because maybe there are some that may say that, but you can't say that all Jewish people have that belief. And even the Old Testament would actually vilify that, right? And say that no, killing women, children in the womb is still wrong. So I think a lot of these arguments are just, they're either misguided, they're based on ignorance. I would trust they're not based on stupidity. I don't want to say that, but I think there's a lot
I
based
like
on
the way you
ignorance.
put that.
Yeah,
Not stupidity,
yeah,
but
yeah.
ignorance.
I-
Lack of knowledge.
I agree with that. 2 years ago, when my daughter-in-law, who's Jewish, had her first baby, we were talking, and she was so upset because she was afraid with the laws that people that were having miscarriages couldn't go to the doctor and have it taken care of.
How
And I said to her,
ridiculous
"Do
is
you
that?
understand what?" Now my mind's gone. It's
Well, the
the
difference in
9-month
yeah,
abortion
right,
is.
right.
She had no concept that a baby could be born in an abortion and left to die.
Yeah.
And she has a degree in social work.
Right.
Now
Well,
that's stupidity.
And that's one of
and
the things like with it,
just
and that's one like with ectopic pregnancies, right? There is a procedure that kills the child in the womb first and then removes part of the fallopian tube. We would say that's morally illicit. You can remove the fallopian tube with the child still living and repair what needs to happen. And if you can't, even reimplant. There is procedures for that. That is not, though, taking the life of the child. That's really the main difference. We talk about the principle of double effect. So the point that you were talking about earlier, when like the physical life of the mother's in danger. Yes, we need to treat the woman, and anyone would uphold that. But you still can't willfully take the life of the child. You can do procedures that will take the life of the child, but it can't be a willful intention to do that. And that's the main difference, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the classic example is, let's say a woman develops like ovarian cancer while they're pregnant. Well, one could argue, why don't you just have the child first, and then you can treat the ovarian cancer. Now, but maybe you could say it's stage 4, it's very advanced. We want to make sure we get it. Yeah, so can a woman go through chemo or, those treatments even though they're pregnant? The church say, yes, you can. Provided you're not trying to kill the child. You're trying to treat the cancer. Now, the child may die in the process. Yes. That would still be morally illicit provided you're not intending to do that, right? So again, no one is arguing that the life of the mother should not be maintained. As a matter of fact, we would say that yes, you should do that, but you still can't willfully take the life of the child in that act.
You know.
Right?
Thank you for clearing that one up,
Yeah.
because I never understood that one.
Well,
Yeah, it can be
also-
complicated.
Also, you have to think about a prosecuting attorney, right? A human being going, oh yeah, I'm going to nail this doctor because this lady, there was a stillborn child, but they aborted the child. So, and that's illegal in my state. And I'm going to get that doctor and I'm going to get, like, I don't see a prosecuting attorney, like prosecuting somebody because it was really needed.
Right.
You know,
And here's the thing,
I just don't
No,
see
it
it
was
happening.
miscommunication.
right,
That's-
and none of the
that
laws
went
are,
around,
and,
and some of the parties pushed that
Yeah,
concept.
yeah.
So
Well,
that they, they.
That's what I'm
made
hearing
it-
in
and
the
no
commercials, and it's
laws
like-
on the books,
Yeah.
whether the even like the heartbeat laws or anything else, are promoting that or even like advocating that.
Yeah.
I think what the thing is though, and this is what makes this law here in Missouri, this amendment so bad, is it actually takes away, it gives actually more protections for doctors that do botch and do bad work. That's the other problem too, that it says, okay, well, I went to get an abortion and my doctor botched it and now I can't have children, or maybe I'm suffering some disability now that I can't do things. Well, sorry, you can't sue the guy anymore. That's been taken away. You're done. Right? Or, the other side would be, well, okay, I went to have this treatment, and in the process of the treatment, the doctor ended up, killing the child and also killing me. Well, sorry, your family can't prosecute that, right? That's done. The law protects the doctor from that,
Wow.
right? And see, that's what I'm saying. Now, it doesn't say that specifically, but there is wording in there that says, it talks about
A
the
good
liability
lawyer
of the
can
doctor,
prove
right?
that in a
Well,
court.
but again, what it does talk about is liabilities of the doctor. It says that the doctor will not be prosecuted for any action. Any action? Like at all? So if you have a really incompetent doctor and they're just kind of hacking away at you and you end up losing blood and dying, your family can't sue that doctor? That's what the amendment is advocating for.
Well, you have to ask if the insurance company is pushing this law.
Well, I mean, whether you talk about the morality of it or not, it's just a badly written law. It's just from a legal standpoint, it's like, this is not a good law to pass. I think that's what I'm saying. I think there's many arguments to not vote for it. And there's maybe only like one, if that, to actually vote for it. Right?
I asked Chris today if there was an extra sign to put in my yard, but she said she would be getting some more tomorrow.
We're picking up some more tomorrow. So we put a call out if anyone wants a yard sign. We're gonna pick up 10 of them. We can get up to 25 though. So
Yes.
depending on demand.
I had wanted one.
Great. Okay. So if anyone wants one, you can call the rectory and we'll reserve one up to 25. I'm trying to keep a couple in reserve just in case. So over at Newman Center, the sign got taken out of the front lawn there. So I had to replace it. And it's there now, so that's good. So hopefully that stays there. But I want to keep a couple in reserve just in case that happens. So I've actually been like I said, I was very encouraged with the life chain of the support that we had, the people that showed up, as well as I've been very impressed with the fact that our signs haven't really been tampered with at all year. Either presentation or if we were at St. Anne. So that's good to see. That's good to see. Happy about that.
Well, the
Great.
response we had from most of the passerbys was very.
Yeah, it was. I saw most were positive. I saw maybe one negative, but for the most part they were pretty good.
Well, I was in Birmingham, so I'm sorry I missed
Oh,
it.
no.
I'm always at work during the fun stuff. I work till like 7 o'clock at night, and then all weekends.
Yep. It was good. Well, great. Is that any other?
Anything
Discussion.
fun coming up this weekend? Anything?
Yeah, who knows?
Anything?
No, nothing big. It's probably fine.
So I snuck in, I guess. I don't know if you've heard, but and you probably haven't. I didn't get my reservation to come to the luncheon until I was okayed at work, and then the cutoff was already. So I really squeaked in.
Oh,
And I was
okay.
going to apologize to Renee tonight. I think she pardoned.
No, she won't be here tonight. She's visiting her daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But you got it in though.
I did sneak in. Yes, they called me yesterday. And they're
Well,
like, "We got you."
FYI, I
So-
think the count was like 177 and they put in 180. So
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah, we're good.
Good.
Should be good, I think. Yeah, it should be a good turnout. Hopefully it'll be benefit. It's actually it's a very short rite. It's not actually, it's kind of, there's some dialogue that happens and there's like a reception from the parish leaders. And so it's kind of, if everyone's ever witnessed an installation for it, it's
I
very,
haven't.
yeah, it's
I
very,
haven't
it's
either.
it's kind of really kind of subdued. But I think it'll be interesting for people to see.
It's been years ago since I've seen it, but, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually put out, I didn't know if this was like proper procedure, but I invite a lot of priests that kind of had some influence on me in my, life and priesthood, like all my classmates, fraternity group members, that kind of thing. And I only got 2 responses are coming. I mean, it's hard on Sunday because, people.
Right.
That's their day.
Yeah, right. So, and they're both retired, so it's kind of funny. They're like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm like, okay, cool.
Well, now that I've got you here, do you want a table reserved for your family? I mean, I'm going to be doing this, so I need to know. I can just
Yeah,
make
I think,
a little sign.
I think I talked to Renee. I told him there's going to be 10 of us. So I think she got that in the works. So yeah, yes.
Because
that'd be
I'm
great.
setting tables up on
Okay.
Saturday.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be nice. Yeah.
Any more than one table?
I don't think so. I think probably fit everyone there. I mean, mostly it's 3 kids, so I mean they can do like laps. We should be fine, I think, with one table.
Or none for your priest friends?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know the one who's only coming to the reception. He said, I'm like, that's fine. So yeah, I think that should be fine. If they want to join us, that's okay too. But
Okay.
that'd be fine. Wherever you put them, I'm sure it'll be okay. They're a very experienced priests. They're used to being around.
Chatty.
Yeah. One I lived with over at St. Gabriel for 4 years, and he was, I knew him all through my seminary career. And then one was my teacher. He actually is a former Christian brother. His name is Monsignor Michael Witt. He taught church history at the seminary.
Oh, I bet that was fascinating.
He's a very good storyteller, that's for sure. So, and he does a great job. So I'm happy he can be there too. So it's good.
Something about abortion. For instance, if a given state decides, so like usually decides to do it its own way, like we shall not do it. Can the state, maybe through the Congress or any other kind of organization, say no to that? Or
I see. Yeah. No. I mean, so that's one thing that's interesting about the United States is that the states are rather autonomous, so they can pass their own laws for their particular jurisdictions. So, in other words, now to that end, if it's voted no, right, it kind of just ends there, right? If it's voted yes, it could go to the court system, right? So, in other words, you could go through the Missouri Supreme Court, and if the Missouri Supreme Court upholds it, you could also appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court could say, well, they can make their own kind of, thought on it, which might be interesting if that does happen. I don't know. Now, so the other thing that could happen from a federal standpoint, the Congress could pass a law that would enable abortion, which would then supersede any laws of the states, right? Practically speaking, will that happen? Probably not, right? But you never know, which is also why the election is kind of important, right? Because it's good to get representatives that's going to uphold life, and even the executive that's going to uphold life, right? I think there used to be a case before. I don't know how much you've been paying attention to American politics in the last few years, Father, but
especially when I was, but here,
right, yeah. So
down there, I've been following.
So you may have known that 3 years ago now, there was a major overturning of a court case back from 1973 called Roe versus Wade.
Yes.
And what the Supreme Court did is said, well, the grounds of that, there was a new case that came up, and they looked at that and said, yeah, this really kind of is not right, what's happening from a federal standpoint. This really should be done by the states. And so what they did is they overturned that ruling back in 1973, but didn't necessarily abolish abortion, but they did say the states, you now have the right to determine for your own people what you're going to do, right?
Yeah.
So there was a great win in that, right? Because, well, that's amazing. Now we can actually be more localized in how that works. I think before that, though, there was a lot more emphasis, though, on the legislative branch, right? So, in other words, voting in members of Congress that would promote life. Because I think at that point, most people were like, well, the courts have already made their decision. We need to really support this from a legislative standpoint. That was sort of the overturning of that court case was sort of like out of left field. Nobody, I think, was really expecting that. And so when it happened, there was great rejoicing. But I also think what happened too is that when people saw that happening, they just thought abortion was over. We're done.
Yes.
But no, we still have to worry about from the state standpoint, right? Which is kind of what we're dealing with right now going into this November here in Missouri. Because there's been other states that have passed laws on both sides that have been very, very liberal when it comes to abortion and very, very conservative when it comes to abortion. And so we're seeing kind of across the spectrum in the United States, these different states doing these things. And now it's kind of our turn to make that determination. I have to say, I am hopeful. I don't know if I should go this far. I'm hopeful in the fact that I think many of the people in Missouri are in general against abortion. And I think when they look at this amendment, they hopefully will see like this is really, really extreme. Right. Now, maybe not so much people in the urban areas, but I think a lot of people in the rural areas especially will see that.
Well, you know, in Michigan, they passed theirs, which was so many people were sick about that.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing too. It's sort of like one of these things where, well, you know, from a moral standpoint, talk about not voting, right? Well, I would say if you're not going to vote no, don't vote on that amendment at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But by not voting on that amendment, are you allowing the yes votes to actually
win out?
Right. I know it's an interesting calculus, right? And I think that more. And so again, not talking about candidates, talking about specific issues. That's when it becomes much more crucial for us to actually use that authority we're given. I think with candidates, you can make an argument, right? But with these issues, I think we definitely have to, with a well-formed conscience guided by the reason of faith, say that this is not good.
I'm so pleased that the church has really come out strong on it.
Archbishop Rosansky has been very, very supportive.
Because I don't remember ever having the strength behind an amendment before like this.
Well, I think there's certain things that are just so extreme, you just have to say, this is just wrong. And I think looking at, and that's the thing about it, looking at that, at the amendment, you're looking at the tenets of it, nothing in it is actually like, you can say like, there's nothing in there, it's good.
We've had some votes come up, but it's all, you know, it's all about riverboat gambling or this and that.
Well, that's number two, isn't it? Amendment 2.
Yeah, the sports betting, and that's a bunch of, but like nothing that this is life intact.
Yes, literally.
So
right.
this I can understand by having our Catholic voice be heard.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other thing too. I mean, it's just so amazing. Like, what if every Catholic galvanized behind these things, right? If you think about the Catholic bloc of voters in the United States, that's a powerful bloc of voters.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, if all the Catholics in the United States were galvanized behind particular issues, you know, some people say you're trying to develop a theocracy.
Would be like the NRA.
Well, that's the thing. It's like there's people say, well, is that develop a theocracy? I'm like, no. That's actually trying to establish a moral, a valued moral institution.
Right. You know.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think in certain ways you can make arguments for candidates or parties, fine, whatever. But with issues, you know, come on, guys, we have to be on the same page here. You know. Yeah. And people can vilify and they can, you know, spout and whatever they want. And I mean, I even people say, well, this is why the church is dying. Really?
I would hope. So let's say we went out across the United States and abolish abortion. I would hope the Catholic faith would be the one to come up and say, okay, now, what about all these children that are having children?
Right.
We have to do something. It's not like we just say no and the problem goes away.
But see,
we've got to be
well,
there to fix that.
and see, John, that's one, I think, also another tragedy of all these things. You know, I mentioned this in my homily at the beginning of the month, but for every abortion clinic in the United States, there actually are 6 crisis pregnancy centers. 6.
Is that right?
Yeah, that
That's
actually
awesome.
help women and families before, during, and even after pregnancy
Well,
with
that's
financial
awesome.
issues, psychological.
I didn't know there were that many.
It's a main statistic. But if you were to go to Google and Google in pregnancy help, well, the first 3 things that pop up there would be abortion clinics.
Yeah.
So it's not an issue of the resources. They're there. We have them already. Do people know about them? Well, we're doing the best we can, but we don't have billionaires that are supporting us
No.
as far as like when it comes to these ways of searching out them, right? But yeah, I think that to me, the first time I saw that, I looked at it a few years ago, and I couldn't believe it. But then I started getting involved in the Respect Life Apostolate, and you see like all the organizations that Respect Life gets grants out every year to these like birthrights, and there's like 25 these pregnancy centers in our area that RLA gives to, and there was only 1 abortion clinic. And it's like, if that's happening here, you look at the national average. It's like, yeah, for every one, like there's like something like I think it was 1 billion abortion clinics, but there are like 6 million pregnancy centers, and it's like, oh,
So there's help.
yeah, exactly. That's the thing. There's not, and these are all provided by the church. A lot of them, they're supported by the church, and so they're all there. Those things are in place, so you can't make the argument there's no support. Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Yes, there
Well, see,
is.
part of the problem is you've done your research and you know that,
Mm-hmm.
but the majority of us don't know
Right.
because these places don't put the word out that, hey, we're here to help
Well,
you.
your father just said.
Well, they do,
you
but they
Google
only
and
do
you
so
get plans.
much. I mean, so like for instance, if you go to the Archdiocese webpage, Respect Life Apostolate, tons of resources. They're all there. You can just click. I mean, 2 clicks, you're there.
Yeah.
But again, if you went to like Google or Yahoo or any of these search engines and you would type in, you know, just pregnancy help, they wouldn't be the top 3.
The only 2 I know about, because my niece went to the one, it was out in St. Charles County someplace. It was a home for young girls that were pregnant and didn't thrive.
Yes.
I don't know if she was pregnant when she had help with Thrive or she helped with Thrive, but she does talk about Thrive. But
No, there's Birthright. There's
yeah.
we have Our Lady's Inn. I mean, there's tons of places that women can go to if they're in a pregnancy to get any help they need.
My one thought, and I don't want to say complaint, but I'm 78 years old. 79, excuse me. And I don't know that I could even count on one hand when I ever heard a homily directed towards sex, what you can and can't do, or what's right or what's wrong. And of course, now I was in grade school in the 50s. We got no kind of training or information at all.
Sure.
Now my son is 43, and when he went to Mount Providence grade school over here, when it came to, I think it was 5th grade, they offered sex education at the school, but the parents had to sign to let the child do it in the 5th graders. And we signed it. And there was, I don't know if they decided it was a day thing or a week thing, I don't remember. But my son said some of the parents did not allow their kids to do it, and those kids were excused from the class. And the ironic thing, when my wife, she picked him up from school, and he said, well, Mom, we had that class today, blah, 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 you know. And of course, a kid in 5th grade, he's hearing some of these words for the first time. He said, Mom, but he said, that thing about administration sure sounds gross. Yeah, you know, that was his, you know, and she laughed about it. And she talked to him, explained, you know what. But
no, I had similar experience in my grade school too. Like we had to sign, our parents had to sign something in 5th grade, and I will say, you know, we had a lady woman, Mrs. Lemp, God love you. I'm sure, I don't know if you're still around or not, but God love you either way. And she did it really well. It was an entire course over the semester called Family Life. And at one, so they talked about the sexual act, and she did something very, I thought, was really really good. She sat us all down and said, "Okay, look, I know you guys are 11 years old, but we're going to have a mature conversation, and you can ask whatever question you like, and you can write it down and put it in this box, be anonymous, and you can ask any question you want about sex, and I'll answer to the best of my ability, or if I don't know, I'll try to find someone else. But I also want you to be mature about it. And I'm going to trust you with this." And that actually was spoke, I think, at least to me. I don't know about everyone else, but I will say that my classmates did a phenomenal job of being respectful, and they asked questions that were sort of intimate, but good questions. And God love her, she answered them. And I think to that point, I think the reason they have that is because I think the church also says, well, parents, you're the first teachers of your children. And if you want to have that conversation with them, you can.
Yeah.
Provided that and the assumption is you're well formed and you're conscious, understand what that is. But I don't think it was really taught all that much because, well, there have been developments in certain ways, right?
I taught confirmation at presentation, and we covered the commandments, and we covered everything, including sexual things. And I got questions.
Yeah.
And I answered them.
Well,
and then I got in trouble from the priest for it.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Like for instance, I'm going to talk about the second
He had
graders.
a heart attack, okay?
I'm going to talk about this. So we're getting ready for first reconciliation with our second graders, right? And I'm planning next Monday to talk to them about the 5th and 6th commandment. Now the 5th, okay, that's, we can talk about murder. They can handle that kind of stuff. Being your parents, we can talk about that kind of stuff, authority. How do you talk about adultery with a group of 7-year-olds? And my approach to that typically is it's kind of reducing someone's dignity. That's kind of how I approach it, because at that age, that's kind of what I think they can understand. When you treat someone else less than, that's kind of at the heart of the 6th commandment. Now, you can't really go any further with that age, right? As far as sodomy, that's not good. It's just like, because they'll be, what's sodomy? Oh, right. Ask your parents, right? I don't want to introduce those concepts because you guys are 7 years old. Yeah. That's not even on your mind. At least I hope it's not at this age. But I think to your point, when you kind of have that conversation again, right? When you go back and look at the morality of the 6th commandment and say, look, guys, the marital act is meant for these purposes. It's a unitive action and it's a procreative one. And what that means is, basically what that means for the church would teach is that as long as the act ends with the potential for life, that's it. So in other words, what about foreplay? Yeah, cool. Whatever you want to do to get in the mood or get yourself all revved up, go for it. As long as that action ends with the potential for the unitive and the procreative aspect, right? Good. Actually, Christopher West, I don't know if you guys ever read him. He actually has some really good books. It actually stems from Theology of the Body, but he goes into some detail about some of this, the intimate actions that would consider illicit, and he even goes like foreplay and that kind of stuff and how that can actually be very good for marriage. But I think the problem is a lot of couples don't understand. Well, there's kind of two extremes there. Either, well, whatever we do, we're maybe sinful, or well, it doesn't really matter because we're married. Whatever we do is fine, right? And both of those are wrong. Right? So I think what we would teach is, and what the church teaches is, look, sexual action isn't something to be avoided. It's something that's beautiful and unitive and life-giving, and couples should engage with it, right? Even if they're infertile, or even if they're not in a fertile stage, good, do that. But it has to end with that potential to happen, right? So things like sodomy, anal sex, again, you could do that provided the action doesn't end with that, right? These are important to understand. And I think, unfortunately, I think there's kind of two aspects of that. Either you have a bunch of celibates, or those or even virgins, with our sisters maybe, who never experienced it and wouldn't really know how to talk about it or want to talk about it. And then you have then on the other extreme, you have lay people who don't really know the theology behind it, right?
You just nailed it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think we have two extremes there that are actually trying to present it, which I think that's why Christopher West is, I'm appreciative of his writings. I think he goes in detail about those things, which is I think beneficial. You know, and it's all based on theology of the body from John Paul II.
Because I've got a grandson who's in the fifth grade, and I'm going to ask my son if they've heard anything from the school, what they're going to do.
Yeah, that's always difficult too, because I mean, even from a school perspective, you can make an argument that's not really our job.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk about the biology of it, but like as far as like
The morality.
yeah, all that.
Yeah.
I mean, even the morality we can maybe talk about that, but like what a parent wants their child to know at what age, that's up to the parent. You know, so yeah, it can be kind of difficult. I think, you know, I think unfortunately that's the fifth grade. I mean, maybe argue maybe should even go younger.
These
You know,
kids
in
know
these
so
days,
much today.
right? With the internet and everything. Yeah, I mean, it's I shudder. I kind of praise God I'm not a natural parent because like I see I have nieces and nephews and you know my sisters and their spouses and my parents, they do rely heavily on screens. Now I think they put, you know, blockers on there and do the best they can to make sure they're not looking at content that could be something that's, you know, good. And my oldest niece is 7 years old, and you know, but I mean, can you do that perfectly? I don't think you can. Right? You know. So yeah, praise God I'm not a natural parent.
I'm glad I'm 73.
Right.
Well, it's just, I don't know. I just think sometimes a little word from the pulpit.
Yeah. Well, and
I know it's difficult. I had a priest tell me one time that I guess he didn't come right out and say it was the bishop, but he said there were three things they were told not to preach about. And one of them was voting, and one was premarital sex. That's what he said. And I forget what the third one was.
That's unfortunate.
But I don't know. But
well, I mean, here's the thing. I think we definitely can't, again, when it comes to voting, you can talk about voting. You can talk about issues all you want.
Yeah. You
can't say you should vote for this candidate or this party is superior. You can't do that. Or you shouldn't do that, I guess I should say. Because you can do anything, but you shouldn't do that. And I don't know, premarital sex, I think that's the thing. We've kind of, I will say, as someone that has prepared couples for marriage, at least in the Catholic Church, I think there's a movement back to that understanding of chastity. So that's at the heart of these things, right? Is chastity. It's chastity takes different forms depending on your state of life, right? So as a celibate man, my chastity is much different than those who are married, right? They're both chaste, at least they should be, but they're directed to different ends, right? My chastity is directed towards the people I serve. The chastity of a married couple is directed towards the other, right? So, yeah, and for single people, well, that chastity is also directed towards, you know, serving God's people, right? We don't really understand it though. To your point, Ken, I don't think I was ever told in my formation, growing up, what chastity really is.
Why wouldn't he?
All it really said is don't have sex before marriage. Okay. Or one heretical homily I heard in high school from our chaplain who said that and I don't even remember what the gospel was. I don't remember what the context was, but he said, you know, gentlemen, if you're going to do it, just make sure you wrap it up. Now I remember even that time, just like, that doesn't sound right. I don't know. Now he may be talking about like it's the lesser of two evils. If you find yourself that you're going to do it, I don't know, fine, whatever. But again, it's not good to tell a bunch of 15-year-olds that's really what you should be doing, especially when the church calls us chastity. So yeah, to your point, sometimes too, it's hard to, like, so let's say if they're in the cycle of lectionary, let's say the adulterous woman, right, would come up in the lectionary. That might be a perfect opportunity to talk about chastity, right? The main thrust of that actually is forgiveness and mercy, but chastity has a big part of that, right? Because when Jesus tells her to go sin no more, what he's telling her, maintain your chastity, right? What does that mean for her? That means you'll have your own dignity of yourself, to recognize that you have this great gift of sexuality, and that shouldn't just be spread out to anybody who comes calling. That's meant for a particular purpose and end. That's what chastity is. We don't talk about that.
No, we don't, and it's too bad we don't.
Right. Right.
You know, because that centers in on respect for self.
Well, it also centers in on these other issues we deal with in society,
Yeah.
whether it be pornography or
Yeah.
infidelity or, you know, masturbation or abortion. They're all rooted in a lack of chastity. Right? So, yeah.
Well, they ought to listen to us. We're pretty smart at this table, aren't we?
I think I figured it out tonight, yeah. I've only put this up on the internet somewhere. It's people read it. I don't know.
I'm not going.
No, but I think too, like sometimes though we get so focused on particular issues because, you know, okay, yeah, we can talk about chastity, but hey, we got this other thing called abortion. Can we deal with that first? You know, it's part of that's kind of put things in priority, I suppose. And, you know, of course, being all things, all people, you want to try and do all of it. But I think there are issues that keep on popping up that you have to kind of address and say, okay, yeah, this we need to kind of, you know, talk about, right? Because I think even today we're seeing things that come about which are presented as goods, and there is, at least on the face, goods, right? But there's not like we're talking about even with voting, there's not that research being done to scratch the surface and see what's underneath this. And typically when you do that, you find, oh, there's some issues here that we really need to address. I think a great example of that right now, it's not being, let's talk about it recently, but not in the light that it probably should be, is in vitro fertilization. IVF, you know, I remember when it first came out, and I think most people were like, this is a miracle. Wonderful. Infertile couples are having children. That's amazing. And I think in general, yeah, that is great. Until you start looking at how it happens.
And then 8 or 9 babies die.
Right. And then you're like, wait a minute. And now some people might argue, what if you can fine tune it to the point, the process where you only have one embryo that's implanted or fertilized and implanted? Well, okay, but the problem with that is, you know, we're talking about the sexual act, right? The problem with our society is we try to separate the procreative and the unitive. So in other words, okay, I want the sex without the baby, or I want the baby without the sex, right? Well, no, you know, I mean, it's got to be both and there, right? Yeah, it's a difficult discussion sometimes. Yeah.
Well, I've learned so much just coming to these at times. And a lot of this stuff I wish I knew when I was a heck of a lot younger.
Me too. Me too. I mean, it is amazing. Like honestly, you know, growing up, you know, went to Catholic school, you know, went to Mass every Sunday, but you know, a lot of this stuff didn't really come up in our conversation. Yeah. I just know I'm very, very pro-life because of my mother. I remember one day we were talking about abortion in class, and I went to her and I said, "So, Mom, like, what do you think? I mean, you're a woman, you know." You're the most influential one in my life. You know, I think it was probably like 6th grade or something. And she's like, yeah, you know, it's killing a baby in the womb. And she said this, I think, or any mother would rather sacrifice their life than life for their child. And that always struck me. I was like, because even though the church does teach about double effect, you know, she's like, no. If my death meant the life of my child, that's what I'm going to do.
When I had my confirmation class, we had this discussion about exactly what an abortion is. Mm-hmm. And I was in the choir at presentation, and it just hit me how to do this, and whether it was wrong or not, this is how I approached it. We're going to be planting bulbs that day out in the spring. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. I had a tulip bulb that was just beautiful, and I said, this is what we're going to plant and what's going to happen. And they said, well, the flowers are going to come up, and I said, that's right. And then I took my garden shears and I cut it in half, and I said, that's an abortion.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing. I mean, we talk, because I think in the medical field, they use the term abortion rather generally. So they would even say like a miscarriage is an abortion, is abortion of the pregnancy. But that's why it's very specific in our terms. Because the way we define abortion is the willful taking of the life in the womb, right? That's how we would define it. Because there are circumstances which happen where miscarriage can happen. Or, you know, again, you do a surgery for the life of the mother that the child dies. We wouldn't say that would be an abortion per se, right? But the willful taking of a life is murder, right? And if it's in the womb, that's how we define abortion. So yeah, I think that's a good analogy to say, yeah, okay, we have this potential, right? That everything of this being is now here in this actual thing I'm holding. And if we were to let it go naturally, not do anything with it, it would bloom and develop into what it's supposed to be. But if I take that shears and I cut the bulb in half, that's a willful action on my part that stops that from happening. That's what abortion is. Right? So, yeah, I think that's a good analogy.
Oh, it came from the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
It didn't come from me.
Yeah, and so I think that's the thing. I think that's one thing dealing with working in abortion healing ministry is that, when you talk to these women who have experienced this trauma, I think they really felt compelled they had no other options, right? Which is also why I think we need to make a distinction between the moral action and a sinful action, right? Because we can say that abortion is definitely immoral. We cannot say that people that actually procure an abortion are sinners, right? Because there are factors that come into play that affect the mental process or the act of the will that would not make that a mortal sin. I want to be very clear about that, because the other thing we don't want to do is condemn people that have experienced this, because it's not only is it very, very traumatic, I think many women feel they don't have any other option.
Like the saying is, you don't know until you walk in my shoes.
Right.
Right.
Well, then, you're not supposed to judge anybody.
No.
I mean, that's God's job.
No. But I think I usually use this with the second graders too. We can judge actions, we can't judge people, right? So if I see somebody robbing a bank, I can say that's not good. That's happening. Actually, I use this example with the second graders. I said, okay, let's say I walk into a bank and I just say, I want some money. I go up to the teller and I say, I want some money. Now, I don't have money in that bank, right? I say, is that a bad thing is happening or a good thing is happening? Well, okay, let's say the teller starts giving me some money. Is that a good action or a bad action? Oh, it's a bad action. Okay, why? Well, it's not your money. Yeah, that's true. But even saying that in the bank, though, was that a good action or a bad action? Then you start thinking, because the thing when we talk about morality, we talk about an object, an intention, and circumstances, right? So the object has to be good, the intention has to be good, and the circumstances need to be good for it to be a moral action. Only one of those needs to be bad for it to be an immoral action. So if I walk into a bank that I know don't have money in the bank, and I just say, I want some money, that's bad circumstance. And so that would make it immoral just because of that, right? Now, from the teller, what about the teller? Well, maybe the teller thinks I'm robbing them, and maybe I have a weapon. They don't know any better, right? So it's still bad action, but then I ask him this: is anybody committing a sin here, though? And that's part of the problem, right? Well, no. Well, the guy is. Well, why? So Ken said, I think you like it so much. Yeah, I do. What I enjoy with the kids doing these things is seeing them think it out. I enjoy watching them think about it, because you can tell they're like, I mean, you see the expression on their faces, like, yeah, no, it's hard, right? So, but I think it does kind of drive home the point. So, and with them, it's with anybody, it's always good to use like examples. Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions, comments, concerns, heresies this evening? Very good.
No, this was good.
All right.
Thank you again.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah.